deceit and betrayal.
The Agatha Christie trial comes to a close with...
It's been described as a psychodrama.
The War of the Wags.
Playing out on our screens for nearly 3 years now. Poirot for the Instagram age, if you like. A whodunit which began with a tweet in 2019. When Coleen Rooney, aka Wagatha Christie, launched a sting operation online, as she called it. After much sleuthing, she accused Rebecca Vardy's account of leaking stories about her to the press. And today, a judge agreed it was her account as Vardy lost her case against Rooney.
Now, it's worth just sounding out the noise for a moment, of which there is a lot. Coleen Rooney had tried to settle this case out of court, friends say over Prosecco and snacks. But today, a judge ruled that she believed Coleen Rooney had been telling the truth and that she found Rebecca Vardy an inconsistent witness. She called Coleen reliable and honest.
Today, raising a glass to the judge, Lizzie Cundy, a friend of Coleen Rooney's, who told Channel 4 News she's relieved.
I was happy with the result. I've known what Coleen has had to go through for 3 whole years. I mean, this started before the pandemic. There was no war in Europe. You know, so much has changed since this first began, and it was really dragging on. And I know the effect it had on Coleen, it had on Wayne, it had on her family members.
People messaging me, saying nasty stuff. I mean,
the fallout of this, Rebecca Vardy had on TV and in court been tearful about being targeted by trolls. Today, Vardy said she was extremely sad and disappointed with the judge's decision, but hoped the abuse would now stop.
And now onto the infamous missing WhatsApp messages. Now, Rebecca Vardy's team had claimed in a very unfortunate series of events that her agent had lost her phone in the North Sea, which contained vital evidence. Today, the judge ruled that those messages had probably been deliberately deleted and were not lost after all.
Over the 2-week trial in which Coleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy only exchanged the occasional side-eye, we heard how tell and sell stories about the lives of so-called wags had become a staple of tabloid culture. Author Sam Kimberley wrote Wag Wars, the first history on the topic.
You in many ways wrote the manual on so-called wag culture. It's become a bit of a problematic term now. Some people say it's cancelled. Well, what's your take on that?
Well, I think the whole wag thing is over. I think this is probably the death knell for it. There is no longer in the tabloids the appetite for this sort of inside gossip from footballers' wives.
Rebecca Vardy will now have to pay substantial damages to Coleen Rooney, who today said she bore no ill will towards Rebecca Vardy, but that this judgment had proved her 2019 post was right. It was Rebecca Vardy's account.
Well, joining me now to discuss the verdict is media specialist and partner at the law firm Carter Ruck, Antonia Foster. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. There's no way of dressing this up, is there? This has been a disaster for Rebecca Vardy.
It's been a very bad day indeed for Rebecca Vardy. She started this case presumably intent on clearing her reputation. She now has a judgment of the High Court which effectively calls her an unreliable witness and one that has been party to the destruction of documents that were potentially, or at least the losing of documents that were potentially very relevant to this case.
Now, people who've been watching this case, and there are a lot of people who've been watching it on television and on social media, they'll be asking why she decided to take it in the first place, why it seems she refused to settle. What do you think her legal team would have been telling her?
Well, I've no doubt that her legal team, like most legal teams, will have cautioned her at the very beginning before embarking on proceedings that litigation in almost any circumstances can be a risky undertaking. Why she refused to settle, I simply don't know. I'm not obviously party to those settlement discussions, but presumably whatever terms were being proposed between the parties, she didn't consider to be acceptable. I think possibly the judge's insight might be quite revealing. She says in her judgment that she believed that there was a high degree of self-deception coming from Rebecca Vardy, that possibly she just simply didn't really understand the full implications about what it was she was being accused of having done in comparison to what she herself believed she'd done. In essence, that I think she thought that perhaps this was a huge fuss about nothing. Unfortunately, if that was her assessment, it's played out pretty badly for her today.
Just very briefly, I mean, in cases like that, for example, when a client is saying, you know, I really want to keep going, and as the legal team, you think, really, we need to quit now, how do you navigate that?
Well, it's difficult. Thankfully, it doesn't happen too often. Ultimately, you advise your client to the best of your ability, and you then have to follow their instructions. They're the client. Obviously, that changes if they're asking you to do anything, you know, improper or not in accordance with your duties to the court as a lawyer. But provided you're satisfied your client understands the advice that they're being given, and they make a decision to go against that advice, that's ultimately a matter for them.
I mean, this is very much a libel case for the modern age, isn't it? We had digital forensics experts looking for WhatsApp chats, the judge having to get her head round privacy settings, what's public, what's private. Does this test the laws of libel in a modern age?
I'm not sure it does particularly. The principles are the same on social media as they are for a publication in a newspaper or against a broadcaster or however that may be. I think what was particularly caught the public's imagination in this case was the fact that this was two celebrities suing one another rather than perhaps one celebrity suing a newspaper, which is what we've all become accustomed to. So I don't really think this particular case has anything particularly significant to say about our libel laws. It was a factual dispute, and in the end the court greatly preferred the evidence of Coleen Rooney and found in her favour.